Need some assurance that we're really in the end times? On Monday, the USA and Saudi Arabia met to discuss the Israeli peace plan in an ancient city mentioned in the Gog and Magog account, Ezekiel 38. First, this meeting was about the Israel peace plan, possibly part of the covenant with the many, the one that launches the tribulation. Second, the Gog and Magog war is the Bible's most famous end-time battle, and the city that's featured in that account is where the two countries also found in the Magog account both took part. I mean, if you need assurance that the end-time events are happening, this is another piece of that puzzle, folks. So I bet you're saying, I didn't even know this meeting took place, let alone that it could have prophetic implications. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and as you tell us all the time, one reason you follow this channel is because you get information here you just don't get elsewhere. And for this teaching, we need to give a shout out to Fisherman and Michael Tarrant of our advisory team for their keen eyes in spotting the biblical connections to this story. Spotting prophecies like this is sometimes like putting a puzzle together. You can find where pieces go based on what color they are. Red goes with red, blue goes with blue, etc. And this piece is the same color as the Gog and Magog pieces and the covenant with the many pieces. It's not the only puzzle piece, but it's the same color as those two events, so to speak. Now, let's get into some specifics. Did you know both the USA and Saudi Arabia appear to be mentioned in the Gog and Magog account? That's the first connection. The countries are in Ezekiel 38. The USA's Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and the Saudi's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, met in the ancient city of Dedan last week to discuss the conflict in the Middle East and the Israel peace plan as a solution. And look at where they met. In something called the winter tent. It really looks like a Bedouin tent, doesn't it? Something right out of the days of Ezekiel when he wrote the prophecy 2,500 years ago. Isn't that appropriate? And look even more closely. Look at the colors. Did you notice it is purple and scarlet? Just like the colors of Mystery Babylon. We were just talking about puzzle piece colors, and in this case, the tent is a literal one. Now, this isn't the full meaning of purple and scarlet in Revelation 17. Please, you don't have to give us comments about that. But it is one more piece of the puzzle that keen eyes do pick up. The winter tent is a luxury site where the crown prince camps in the winter. And this winter tent is located right over the ancient city of Dedan, as we mentioned. In the Bible, that's the second connection. Today, the town is called Alula, which is a palindrome, a big word that means it's spelled the same frontwards as backwards, sort of like the name Bob. But in those days, the days of Ezekiel, the city was called Dedan, the capital city of Arabia. So let's see where this city is mentioned in the Gog and Magog account and where we think the USA and the Saudis are in it as well. Now, you may already know the Gog and Magog prophecy describes a battle that takes place in the end times. Gog and Magog is also mentioned a second time in Revelation as a battle that occurs after the 1,000 years at the end of the millennium. So there are two Gog and Magog battles. That's the first thing everybody needs to understand. The first one is called the Gog of the Land of Magog battle. It happens in the end times and involves primarily Middle East nations. The second one is the Gog and Magog battle, a worldwide struggle that happens at the end of the millennium when Satan is released from the bottomless pit. Now, we're only discussing the first battle today, the Gog of the Land of Magog account in Ezekiel 38. It's a 3.5-year battle that stretches from Gog's invasion of Israel at the midpoint or middle of the tribulation, and ends after Jesus' triumphant defeat of Gog at the Battle of Armageddon. So Gog of Magog is a 3.5-year battle, and the USA and the Saudis are mentioned in it, and so is this city of Dedan where they just met. But let's set the stage. Prior to the mention of Dedan, Gog, who is the Antichrist, assembles a great army and invades Israel. We know from Luke 21, verses 20 through 24, and Revelation 11, verses 1 and 2, that this invasion happens at the midpoint of the tribulation. And immediately afterward, Gog sits in the temple of God and declares himself to be God. We call this the abomination of desolation. So hopefully that puts this passage in context for you with the rest of prophecy. Now let's look at the passages we believe mention the USA and the Saudis and this city of Dedan as found in Ezekiel 38:13. Sheba and Dedan, there's the name of that city, and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villages will say to you, and that's speaking to Gog, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hoards to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, and to seize much plunder? Now, the passage mentions 3 ancient names in this account: Sheba, Dedan, and Tarshish. So we need to figure out who these nations are today. Most scholars believe Sheba, like in the account of the Queen of Sheba, was a nation on the Arabian Peninsula, probably where the United Arab Emirates are today. So Sheba is most likely the UAE. We already mentioned that Saudi Arabia, its ancient capital was this Dedan. So Dedan is Saudi Arabia. And Tarshish is thought as having existed in southwest Europe, probably in Spain. So today, scholars believe it represents all the Western powers, Europe, and by extension, maybe even the USA, as it was the farthest west from Israel that anyone knew land existed. And at least at that point, the farthest west that Ezekiel knew of. And the USA is far west from Israel as you could possibly get. And notice that the merchants of Tarshish are the ones mentioned in the passage. Europe and the USA are the greatest merchant nations in the world. So this meeting this week was the USA and the Saudis. And guess who else the USA met with this week? That's right, the United Arab Emirates. So the 3 nations found in Ezekiel 38:13 are all involved in world politics this week with the USA. So, how does this fit into the Gog of Magog passage? Well, in that passage, these 3 nations ask Gog if he's attacking Israel in order to loot and plunder it. In other words, for financial gain. But the Antichrist doesn't answer, and the Western nations, the Saudi and the UAE, do nothing to stop his invasion. He overruns Israel, and according to Zechariah 13:8, in this invasion, 2/3 of the nation of Israel are killed. So this isn't an invasion for plunder, as the Western nations ask. It's an invasion for eliminating a nation, trying to wipe them off the face of the earth. But of course, what does the United States and Saudi Arabia think? They're always thinking financially. But what this says is it's not about finances. So this brings us to the covenant with the many aspect of this event. The Antichrist armies, plus those other nations mentioned, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the Western powers, will all likely have been part of this covenant, an aspect of which is likely the peace covenant that's detailed in Isaiah 28:14 through 15, where Israel makes a covenant with death and Sheol, the grave. That peace covenant is what we just saw the USA and Saudis discussing in this meeting this week. The discussion was the early stages of that peace covenant taking place and the 2-state solution that both the USA and Saudis favor. We aren't there yet, but this meeting is one more puzzle piece of the same color, so to speak, moving us forward. And the fact that this meeting took place in Dedan is a prophetic reminder that those same countries are trying to force Israel into this agreement. And they're the same nations that will eventually turn their backs on Israel in its moment of greatest need, the invasion of Israel at the midpoint of the tribulation. It's also a reminder that the peace covenant will not protect Israel, that the Antichrist forces won't honor it. As it says in Isaiah 28:18, your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, you will be beaten down by it. So in answer to our title's question, did the Bible foretell this exact meeting between the Saudis and the USA? The answer is no. But every aspect of this meeting is a foreshadow of what the Bible did foretell, the covenant and the Gog of Magog war. Now, Jesus commanded his followers to watch for end-time events. And this is exactly how you do it. Puzzle piece by puzzle piece, we're getting closer and closer to the main events. And speaking of that Gog and Magog war, I'm sure many of you are wondering, maybe out loud, where Russia is in all this. Saying, I thought Russia was involved. And that is a great question. Click right here to keep watching and discover whether Putin and Russia are involved in the Gog of Magog battle or they aren't, according to the Bible. And you will be surprised. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.